Welcome to Outliers Get to Know. I'm your host, Tracey Devlyn, and I am here with New York Times bestselling author Alma Katsu to talk about her new novel, Fiend. Welcome to the show, Alma.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. As you can see over my shoulder here, I'm quite the fan. How does
Hmm.
it feel to hear New York Times bestselling author in front of your name now?
Well, I'm not used to it, that's for sure. I mean, I was thinking 15 years, this may never happen. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, so it's
yeah.
pretty amazing. But it that's a great project. The anthology that made the New York Times list is an amazing project to be involved in, kind of historic in a way. And
Yeah.
the end of the world as we know it, for people who aren't sure what we're referring to,
Oh,
which is
yes, yes,
based on
thank
the
you.
world of Stephen King's The Stand. Yeah, it's really amazing.
Yeah, it was it's I'm only partway through it and I'm enjoying it so much. As I had mentioned to you before we started recording, after I watched an interview with you and some of your co-contributors, I guess maybe is a better term. I got the stand, the uncut version, which is, for those who aren't aware, at least on the audiobook, it's like 48 hours, but it was amazing. It was so good. And so I finished that up and then I dived into the anthology and I'm just enjoying it so much. And I'm very happy for you guys. Gosh, it was New York Times and USA Today bestseller and Los
It,
Angeles. I mean, it really,
London too. Yeah,
yeah.
it did so well. Yeah.
So happy. So I encourage folks to watch the interview, buy the book, buy the anthology, just go all in like me. You won't be disappointed at all. So
Thank you
but,
so much. Yeah.
yeah, you betcha. Before we get into the Fiend, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your writing journey, if you don't mind?
Sure, because it's such a wacky one. It'll give some people hope. I didn't get my first book published until after 50. I started out when I was very young. I wanted to be a writer, like a lot of writers. I was a kid that always had her head in a book and just sort of assumed that I mean, I knew I wanted to write stories, but I really didn't know how to do it. This was a long time ago before the internet. And I ended up getting the opportunity to work in the intelligence community for, yes, those three-letter federal agencies. And I went not thinking I'd stay, but I ended up having a whole career there. But part of the issue was at that time, they really didn't like you writing or doing anything
Mm.
outside, even if it had nothing to do with your job. So I kind of had to put that part of my life on hold. And at a certain point, I didn't think I'd ever get back to it, but I did. And it took a long time, about 10 years for the first book, The Taker, which I see is on your shelf.
Yes.
And it's been a bit of a roller coaster ever since. As you know, I write in a couple genres now. One is
Yeah.
spy novels because I have the platform, I guess. But also I've sort of transitioned over to horror with this Fiend is the fourth horror novel.
Yeah, and Fiend is a little bit different than your other horror novels because those tended to be more historical, if I'm not mistaken,
Absolutely.
correct?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Very different.
Well, and all very, very good, all very unique. And as you'd mentioned with the doing spy novels, I obviously I've read your Red Widow series, and I just loved it. If anybody out there who's listening loves a good spy novel, I highly recommend that series. Uh, since Alma was, you spent, what did you say, 30 years in the
35
CIA?
years as
35
a federal
years?
employee. And then after I retired, I got hired back as a consultant. So it ended up being over 40 years. It's unbelievable how much
When
time
you
has
think about it, right?
yeah.
Right. But I think your experience that you had, you were able to add those little nuances and layers of authenticity that I love as a reader, and I'm sure other folks do. It's almost like you're this little spy on, I'm sorry, you're this little fly, spy on the wall,
You
this
can
little
say,
fly on the wall.
yeah.
You
No,
know,
I
and
mean,
getting kind of an insider look, you know.
yeah, well, that was sort of what I wanted to do with them, particularly from a woman's perspective. You know, there's a it's espionage, thrillers tend to be male readers, and they tend to want male protagonists and the whole nine
Yeah.
yards. And I always thought it was a shame that we didn't see more about what it's like for women who are intelligence. We make up half the workforce, and yet we weren't being really portrayed very well in popular culture. So I was really grateful to have the opportunity to write those books, which are, all the main characters are women.
Yeah, no, they're absolutely great. I thank you
Well, thank you.
for writing that because, sometimes I don't know if you had this, but when you finish a career, the last thing you want to do is write about it or dive into it. And so I don't know if that was why you took a little while before wrote your spy novel, but anyway, I totally get that. But if you don't mind, since we're here to talk about this new release, why don't you tell us a little bit about The Fiend? I always like the author to give us a summary because I don't want to spoil anything.
Yes, and in this book, it's particularly hard not to get into spoilers, but I'm going to try. So, Fiend is about a family, the Berisha family, who's an extremely wealthy family. Just think one of the wealthiest families in the world, and they run one of the largest import-export businesses in the world, too. But as we come into the story, we see the middle child, Maris. She's very unhappy because she feels she is the best qualified among the children to take over one day from her father, Zeph, both as the CEO, but also as the head of the clan, as they call their family. But that honor is going to go to her brother, Darden. He's the only son, and he's also the eldest child, and that's just the tradition in the family.
Mm,
But she thinks Darden is too soft-hearted and, too meek to run the company, which needs to be run ruthlessly. At least
mm,
that's what they've seen from their father. So she sets her cap to do this, and it ends up sending the family on this collision course, where um, all kinds of things are going to happen. But complicating all this is that there's always been this suspicion that there's something, the Berisha family have something extra, sort of something that protects them. I mean, they almost seem blessed, in business as well as in life. Their rivals, end up dead, or their rivals' companies, there's a landslide, that takes them out. There's something that you can't necessarily pinpoint on a human being. Um, but almost something diabolical. But this is the modern age. We don't think like that anymore.
right.
There's also the possibility that maybe that's sort of a fig leaf that they hide behind, to mask the bad things that they themselves do. So that's what the story's about. It's really an exploration, and we can talk about why I ended up writing a story like this. You can think of Succession, but it's not just a Succession story. It's also about this specific family and the family dynamics and the things we do to each other that maybe mold us in not the best ways, that make people take bad choices in their life.
Yeah, that might tie into one of the questions I wanted to ask you because I think in horror there's often an element of humanity that's kind of boiling beneath the surface that the author likes to explore. And I guess I was wondering what you thought was boiling beneath. I feel like this is more Maris's story than any of the other characters, although they all feature in there very much. But does that, what do you think?
Well, a couple things with all my horror stories, and this might seem kind of weird, but there usually is like a bigger message in them.
Hmm.
And that's not entirely unknown in horror today. I mean, we think of horror stories as generally being very specific to a person, the man who gets bitten by a werewolf and he turns into a werewolf, or, Count Dracula or something like that. But more and more people are using horror to sort of address bigger social issues or that sort of thing. But I've always kind of done that. Even with the historical horror, they're usually pointing to other things that are going on in society. Well, the inspiration for Fiend for me was kind of the times that we find ourselves in. I look around and I think it's almost like Gordon Gekko, right, from
Hmm.
Wall Street. Greed is good again. And it seems like in TV and movies, everything is about super wealthy people and they're luxurious lives, even though we see that they're not behaving particularly well. It's like it doesn't matter how you
Yeah.
made your money as long as you have it. And to me that just seems wrong. Like we're
Mm.
surrounded by people, we can see what they're doing. We know they're lying, cheating, and stealing. Why aren't people getting upset about it? The Sacklers were a big
Yeah.
inspiration for this book too. And it got me to the point where I thought, do people need to see the actual devil like rise up next to somebody in a cloud of smoke, put his hand on his shoulder? Is that what it's going to take? And voila, that's where Fiend came from.
Oh, that's great. Well, I've never tried to write horror, but it seems like there are, I mean, and this is coming from somebody who doesn't write an outsider's view, but it seems like there are few guardrails for the genre. And I was wondering, do you find that writing in this genre to be a sort of release for you? And I guess I am trying to tie it back to a little bit about your time in the CIA and some of the other alphabet agencies that you worked for. I don't know. Is there a release for you in writing this genre, or is that completely bonkers?
No, it's not completely bonkers. I know people are very curious, like, how does someone who worked in intelligence for all that time end up writing horror stories? Whereas people who know me as a horror writer can't believe that I worked in intelligence. There's just something really incongruous about the two, and I agree. But I started writing, I mean, actually, the Taker, as you know, is really kind of falls more in the fantasy realm. It's one of those sort of dark supernatural romances, paranormal romance, I should say, for lack of a better word. Now I ended up kind of drifting out of that and moving towards horror. I had been a big fan of speculative fiction when I was growing up, so a lot of the Gothic and Edgar Allan Poe and all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. And I tend to want to go back to that in my writing, but it certainly doesn't mesh with the intelligence side. I mean, there is some overlap, and I'll get to that in a second. But I think the reason I like writing horror is just because I am drawn to that side of life, right? Especially when I was younger, I was much more into the mystery and the magic. And that, I really wanted there to really be a magical world. I really wanted to believe in the supernatural. Now I'm a scientist. No, I don't do that anymore. Makes it a little harder to write those books.
Yeah.
But there's still something really appealing about looking at that side of life, even if you don't necessarily believe it. And most of my books, there's a suspension of belief. It could be supernatural, but there could be a explanation, a rational explanation for things. One thing I noticed though, as I've been doing promotion for Fiend, is that there is something common to all my stories. And I think it comes from my time in the intelligence community. And that is what's going on in the book is not really what's going on. Like a character
Mm-hmm.
will tell you, this is what I'm thinking, this is why I'm doing something. And it's not necessarily, I think, that they're an unreliable narrator, but it's because I've just seen that normally we try to fool ourselves in what we're doing. Whether in the course of our day, a lot of us have a hard time really admitting to ourselves what's really going on in our lives. And of course, in intelligence, that's the business. You may know the truth, you may know a part of the truth, but you can't just share it with everyone. There are compartments and information is protected. And I think it's just become part of my nature that
Uh,
that's how it comes out. So it is funny, but yeah, I
yeah.
was talking to someone, I was like, darn, if that doesn't happen in every book. It's really, really thick here in Fiend, I think.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I would agree with that for sure. Is there is there as you had mentioned, you've written in different genres, but is there a story that you would like to write, but you just haven't convinced yourself to tackle it yet for whatever reason?
Wow, that's a great question. Unfortunately, I'm at the point of my career where the business side dictates a lot of stuff. You're gonna, you have this idea and you can't really write it because there's not a market for it right now. And so you're pitching other ideas. I mean, I would love to write a vampire story. I know a lot of people thought that The Taker was a vampire story, but it wasn't. Close, but no banana. Um, I would love to write a vampire story, but when it comes to horror, I really like to, I don't like cliche. I don't like to just trod the same ground over and over again with
Hmm.
just a few new details. So I'm trying to think of a really different vampire story, and it just hasn't gelled yet for me.
Okay, well, hopefully we'll see it in the near future. That I think that would be great. I
Wouldn't it
love
be
a good
fun? Yeah.
vampire story myself, absolutely. I besides the kind of the Stephen King anthology that you wrote, I noticed that you have written several other short stories and some for Audible. Uh, I guess what draws you to that structure over a novel, or is it just opportunity, or is there something that that you have to say and that's the form that you want to say it in? Any
Well,
thoughts
it's
on
been a
that?
bit of discovery for me because I
Okay.
really never considered myself a short story reader. I wrote short stories when I was in grad school because we all have to write them. I didn't think I was particularly good at it. And, but what publishers want is a novel, right? If you write fiction, they
Yeah.
don't really have much use for short stories. It's a good way to break into a market or to establish yourself. But I sold a book right away. So I kind of stayed away from it for the longest time. And then once I got into horror, because anthologies are so prevalent in the genre, I started getting the opportunity to write short stories for anthologies. So I started doing it and I really enjoy it now. Now that I know
Yeah.
what I'm doing, I really enjoy writing them. And then I got the opportunity to write a few stories for Amazon Original Stories. And that has really been eye-opening because it's such a sweet spot, right? I mean, my limit is 25,000 words, and that has to do with my contract with Putnam,
Okay.
right? A lot of
Yeah.
the Amazon original stories don't run up to 25,000, but we try to run it up as far as we can. And so it's not as much as it's not the major slog that a novel is, but you get a little bit more runway than a traditional short story. Like I find it really hard to write under 5,000 words. Um,
Hmm.
just
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
25,000 is a bit of a stretch. You're almost tipping over into, okay, now I need to add more backstory or I need to do this or that.
Yeah.
But the thing I really like about short stories is you can be more mysterious. You can hide more things. You can be more artful in that misdirection and that sort of thing. And it's not going to catch up with you later in the book, like in a
Yeah.
novel.
Absolutely. And I find that because I'm starting to read more and more short stories myself, and I find that authors don't explain things and they allow the reader to interpret it how they will. And I think that that shows you how smart readers can be because we don't have to be spoon-fed the information. Just give us the bare bones and we'll figure it out. Or like you said, you can kind of lead them in a direction and a little bit of misdirection and that sort of thing too. So
It's very
yeah.
liberating. I encourage, if you don't write short stories, you guys might want to give it a try. The other thing
Yeah.
is, I've been reading lately, or I've been hearing lately in the business, that readers are leaning towards shorter novels now.
Mm.
And, we've all heard this over the years, right? It swings one way,
Yeah.
and then a George R. Martin book comes out, a real upper, and people go back to writing long novels. But it seems like the pendulum is swinging a little bit, and it's favoring shorter fiction.
Okay, yeah, that's good information for sure. Well, I always like to ask my guests to tell us about a recent book that you've read and loved, and maybe why, if you can think of one. Sometimes it can be a little hard to think of one off the top of your head.
Isn't that the way? Every time I get asked that question, like the last books I read, just like disappear from my head. Because I feel like I've read a lot of really good ones, but of course now that's like slipping out of my hand, my fingertips. Well, I read Laura Lippman's latest book, Murder Takes a Vacation. I mean, I read all genres.
Yeah,
And I've always been
yeah,
a huge Laura Lippman fan, so anything she puts out, I will read. And it was really an eye opener for me because she tends to write mysteries that are a little grittier, right? A little bit more
okay.
day to day. But Murder Takes a Vacation was a departure for her. And it's almost a cozy. It really is a cozy. The main
Ah,
character is a
interesting.
retired woman. I'm a retired woman. And yeah, I mean, it has a little bit more teeth than the average cozy, but it was quite different for her. And it was super good. So I encourage
Okay.
anyone who's interested in something like that to pick it up and give it a read because it was very well done.
There you go. There's another well-established author who's just kind of spreading her wings a little bit and trying something different, and it sounds like it works, so it's great. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm not
wonderful.
exactly sure. I didn't dig into why she decided to do it. The main character is a secondary character from her old Tess Monaghan series. So it might have just been that she always thought she'd get back to this character. I'm not
Ah,
sure. She and I
yeah.
are the same age, so I was kind of wondering if she was feeling that pressure too,
Yeah.
for women of a certain age to write certain kinds of books. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I hear you. So, this is just a fun little question. What is your favorite thing to do when you finish a book? How do you celebrate or treat yourself, or do you? Or do you just go to the
Don't.
next book?
I am a cheerless grind is what I am.
Yeah.
And that's back to my
Cheerless
intelligence.
grind. I love
There's like
that.
never a downtime, you always just sort of fall right into the
Yeah.
next thing. This time, well, actually, the timing worked out really well, and I can't claim any credit for it. But I handed in the manuscript for my next book under contract the day before, like the intensive promotion for FIEND kicked off.
Oh,
Right. So, like, oh, I don't have to worry about writing anything, answering, doing edits, nothing for a while at least.
yeah.
And I can
Yeah.
concentrate on this. And it's never worked out like that before.
Oh, that's good. That's great. All right. Wonderful. Well, before we go, can you give us a hint about what's coming up next, or is it kind of mum's the word right now?
Well, it's just everything's so far out. I am just about to sign a contract for another spy novel,
Ah,
and it's a little different. Thank you, thank you. And as soon as I can announce that I will, um, there will be another horror novel and another contemporary horror novel. The working title right now is Incarnate, but we don't have a date for it yet.
okay.
And there's a lot of TV stuff actually in the works. We have three
Nice.
series in development. One is in production. So hopefully I'll have
Oh
some
my gosh.
news I can share. I know it's a complete
Exciting.
unbelievable, right? Whoever thinks something like this is going to happen. So we'll
Yeah.
see. It still could fall through, but this is
Yeah.
the furthest I've gotten.
I love that. Having watched your career, the trajectory, and I love that everything's coming together for you now, and I'm just so happy for you. That's great.
Thank
It's
you. You
absolutely
know how it
great.
is. You just have to keep going. You just have to keep
Yeah.
chugging, and nothing happens overnight.
Yeah, absolutely. Persistence is the name of the game in this business. I really believe that.
That's true. That's
All right.
true.
Well, folks, when this episode airs, Fiend will be out, so be sure to order your copy today. You can check out Alma's website at almakatsubooks.com. Alma, what social media platform are you most active on?
Well, probably Instagram, but I have to say the best thing for people to do is if they could subscribe to my newsletter on Substack,
Okay.
because algorithms really don't push out stuff very consistently anymore, but that will tell you all the latest things that I'm up to, tour schedule, but also I write a bit about, what it's like to have a writing career and also
Living
I
in the
used to be
mountains.
and the mountains. Yeah, there's
Yeah,
there's
yeah,
some of
yeah.
that too. Although I don't do as much on the mountains as I used to. I've been doing a lot on technology actually, because that was
Hmm.
where I was when I left the government. I was a technologist and did a lot of work in data analysis and generative AI. So I've been writing updates on what's going on with that and where we are legally. Yeah.
You're probably very busy about that right now, aren't you, with the Anthropic and all that coming out? Yeah,
Yes, yeah. As a matter
absolutely.
of fact, on the 20th, I'm going to be giving, I do a generative AI primer particularly for writers. It really is more about the implications of it, not how to use it, but this is where we came from, this is the history, give you some context and kind of think about where we're going.
Ah,
And that is
okay.
a fundraiser for the San Diego Writers Festival. So it's online. And if you look up San Diego Writers Festival Day of Learning, you'll see it. You have to register in advance. Like I said, it's a fundraiser, so there is a fee for it, but there's six other speakers besides me, I think. So hopefully worth your money.
All right, great. Well, thank you for that. We'll check that out. Well, thanks a ton, Alma. This was it was such an honor to meet you after all this time of being friendly online and everything. So very happy that you came to talk with us, and I can't wait for readers to get their hands on this amazing book. It's wonderful.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Yes, it's been great to talk to you in person.
Yeah, you betcha. Many thanks to everyone listening. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I'll be back soon with another great read.